In this video, we're going to show you how to replace a lower control arm on your Chevy Express 2500. This is going to be located behind the front wheels. Let's get started. Using a 22mm socket, remove all of the lug nuts for the hubcap. Remove the hubcap. Using a 22mm socket, remove the 8 lug nuts. Remove the wheel. Using a pair of pliers, we're going to pinch the ABS plastic clip and remove it from the bracket. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for the bracket. Follow the brake line up to the upper control arm, and we have one more. Pull those brackets up. Using a trim tool, we're going to remove the plastic clips for the ABS harness plastic stays. Get under it, pop it straight up. We have one more on top of the strut tower. Pop that out. On your connector, lift up on the tab and push straight back and remove the connector. And then pop that connector out. Here we are on the back side of our caliper, and we're going to remove our 2 caliper bracket bolts using a 21mm socket. Get both of the bolts loose before you remove them. Remove both bolts. Be sure you have a hand on the caliper. We're going to take our whole assembly and we're going to swing it forward to the front where we have a hook hanging off of our sway bar link. Pull the caliper over and I'm going to hang it on that hook right off our sway bar so there's no tension hanging on our hose. Remove the rotor off of the hub. If you need to, you can shock it with a hammer to loosen the rust. Using a 5mm Allen key, we're going to remove the bolt for the ABS. Remove the bolt for the ABS sensor. Using a pair of pliers, we're going to gently wiggle this back and forth and break the rust up and remove it. Using a 24mm socket, remove the lower ball joint nut. We're going to leave this on just 1 or 2 threads. Using an 18mm, remove the upper ball joint nut. Again, leave that on just a few threads. Using a 21mm socket, remove the nut for the tie rod end. Remove that nut. Use a pair of locking pliers and grab onto the nut for the sway bar link. Hold your wrench still while using a 15mm socket to remove the bolt for the sway bar link. Remove the sway bar link bolt. And we can go around and remove all of the pieces. We're going to use a hammer to release the tension on our ball joints. We're going to hit right here on the back side of our knuckle, and it'll pop the tension off. See that top one let go. And take the nut off of that and then drop this slightly forward. Do the same thing for the tie rod. We're going to hit on that outside on the back side and pop that out. And remove that from the knuckle. Release that lower ball joint. Get a hand on the whole knuckle assembly. Remove that lower nut. And remove the knuckle assembly. Install a jack under the lower control arm. Take just a little bit of the tension off. Using a 13mm socket, remove the 2 bolts for the bottom of the shock. Using a 15mm wrench and an adjustable, we're going to hold the strut still while we remove the nut. Once your nut starts to go loose, put a hand on the bottom of that strut. When you remove the nut, remove the strut out of the bottom of the control arm. We're going to go down on our jack now, removing the tension off of our spring. When you're doing this, do not stand in front of the spring if you do not have to. Take as much tension off of the spring as you can. Just be very careful and know that this spring is still under tension until it's nice and slack and it's wiggling around inside of there. Using an 18mm to hold the head of the bolt, we're going to use a 24 to remove the nut. Remove the nut and remove the washer. Using a 24mm wrench to hold the nut, we'll use an 18mm socket to remove the bolt. Remove the nut. Once you have all of the tension removed off of the spring, your control arm should drop down and you'll be able to remove that from the vehicle. I'm going to use a punch to help me remove the bolts from my control arm. Remove the bolt. Do the same thing on the front. You may need to give them a little tap to loosen them. They get stuck in the bushings. If you have to tap your bolts through, be sure to not mushroom the end of it. We still need our nut to go back on. If you really need to start swinging on this bolt, put a nut on just a few threads and swing at the back of the nut. Remove the front bolt and remove the control arm assembly. Install the new control arm into place and get the bolt started through it. Make sure you use the long bolt on this rear and make sure you use the short bolt on this front one. Get the bolts fully installed. Install the washer and the nut. Do the same thing on the rear one, washer and nut. Install the spring up into place. Be sure it's sitting the way it came out. Be sure it drops into this little cup in the back. Get your jack reinstalled under the control arm. We're going to go up on our jack until we start to give this tension. Install the shock up through and get the nut started on top. Push the shock into place and get your bolts started. Keep releasing tension on the spring with your jack until you're able to get these bolts in. Snug them down. We're going to snug down our top nut. Go until you feel it bottom out. Now that we have our shock installed, we can remove our jack. Now our shock is holding all the tension on that spring. Get the bushing installed on top and below and put the spacer in between them. And install the bolt through your assembly, up through the top. Grab that nut. We're going to gently get this started. And snug it down. You want to go until you have some squish inside of your bushings, but you don't want it to be flat and them to be pushing out of the sides. Install the knuckle and get that lower ball joint nut started. Get the upper ball joint started into the knuckle. Install the tie rod end into the knuckle. Get the nut started. Snug it down. Snug down the top ball joint nut. And it started spinning on us. Pull the control arm down into the knuckle, and that should stop the stud from spinning. If it doesn't, grab a large pry bar and pull down, put it in between the spring, and then push down on that upper control arm and snug it right up. I'm going to lift up on my knuckle and I'm going to snug down the nut. Install the ABS sensor into the hole. Get the bolt started by hand and snug it down. Torque the bolt to 5 foot-pounds. Install the rotor. Go forward and grab your caliper from where you have it suspended or hanging. Pull it up and over and get it installed around the rotor. Get the bolts installed. Snug the bolts down. Torque the caliper bracket bolts to 220 foot-pounds. Install your brake bracket down on top of the knuckle. Install the bolt. And snug it down. Follow the brake line up and install that second bolt for the bracket. Snug it down. Install that ABS harness clip into the bracket. Follow the control arm up. We have a plastic stay right here. We have one more on top of our strut tower. Get it installed into place. Same thing with our connector. There's a Christmas tree on the bottom. Push that in and install the connector. Push until you hear a click. Give it a push. Make sure it's locked on. Torque the upper ball joint to 37 foot-pounds. Torque the tie rod end nut to 47 foot-pounds. When you're torquing these studs, be sure that the studs are not spinning. Torque the lower ball joint to 74 foot-pounds. We're going to snug down our control arm bolts. Do the same thing on the back side. We're going to install a jack under our control arm. Jack the suspension up to where it would sit at ride height. When you're doing this, look at your jack stands. Be sure you're not pulling the car off of them. Once we have our suspension at ride height, we can go under and torque our control arm bolts. Torque the control arm bolts to 114 foot-pounds. Make sure you hold the bolt while torquing the nut. Do the same thing on the back side. Remove the jack out from under the vehicle. Install the wheel. Install the 8 lug nuts by hand. Snug the lug nuts down. Using a 22mm socket, we're going to torque the lug nuts to 140 foot-pounds in a star pattern. Install the hubcap. Snug all the nuts down. And you're good to go.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.